Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Mike Maxwell from Imperium Press. He's also the co-host of the Culture Dads podcast and as well a heathen. In this conversation, we talk about his heathenism, patriarchy, and what his critique of liberalism and what it takes to be something that's not liberal, not Christian in a post-Christian, post-liberal world. I enjoy Mike a ton. Links to his work are down there in the description. And if you enjoy this content, consider liking, subscribing, donating. Hope you're having a good holiday season. Without further ado, here is Mike Maxwell. Well, good morning.
Hello. Well, thanks for having me on here.
No, absolutely. I'm kind of ashamed to say I just stumbled upon you like 2 weeks ago, I think. YouTube recommended a podcast with you on the Culture Dads, and it was about your kind of like a run through the dissident right thinkers who have been kind of studying or like interfacing with for a couple of years now.
Perhaps the neo-reaction episode.
Neo-reaction, yeah. DR, neo-reaction. Woke right, if you want to go there.
Yeah, the woke right. Yeah, that's certainly the meme du jour. You know, it's as organic as can be.
Oh yeah, totally organic, like movie popcorn, buttery, saucy movie popcorn. And so I stumbled upon you, and I was looking for more of you, but you're so scattered. Like there's no place where it seems like you would have been doing this for years and years and years, and I'm sure you have, but it's not like readily available in my like scrounging around. So.
Yeah, well, there's a reason for that. It's because I have been mostly kicked off of some of the major platforms. Although I am, we are on YouTube, two channels actually. There's the Culture Dads channel for anybody that is not familiar. That's Culture with a K, Culture Dads. You can find us on culturedads.com. But we have a YouTube channel where we post some of the excerpts from our podcast. And now this is a podcast by myself and Dave Martell. He is a heathen podcaster. He's been doing it for a long time. He's an absolute pro.
Sorry,
it's like my favorite.
Did you say heathen podcaster?
Heathen, yes, pagan, heathen, okay. What have you. You know, that's so basically the angle, I suppose, for our podcast is that we're two pagan or heathen dads that are, kind of doing something a little different. We talk mostly about culture. There's a ton of political podcasts in the space. Actually, the episode you caught was definitely one of the more political ones. But so each week, and we've been doing this for about 3 years now, we take a topic, whether it be something like, it was a couple different genres. So we'll do culture. So we've done movie reviews. We sometimes trade albums and do like reviews of albums. We'll talk about
pizza at length.
We have a pizza episode. Yes, we're well known for being pizza aficionados. So yeah, anything to do with, so we might talk about music. We might talk about an art movement. We did one on modernism in art. We did one on the fin de siècle. I'd have to go through the list. There's a huge list of topics that we've covered. So some of them are on art. Some of them are on like a historical movement, or sometimes even a civilization. We've recently done an episode on ancient Egypt. We did one on the birth of liberalism, myths of liberalism. We did the one on neo-reaction, which is sort of a more political angle. So we cover all kinds of different topics, but for the most part, it's anything to do with culture, as broad as that spectrum is. And yeah, it's been going for several years now, and we're on Gumroad. So that's probably why you haven't heard of us, is that it's basically a podcast, sort of like I think Bronze Age Pervert is also on Gumroad, but that's really the only platform we're on, apart from YouTube, where we have a few excerpts posted. I think we're going to probably do something a little different with the YouTube channel in the new year to kind of push it a little further. Because a lot of people say, why aren't you guys, why don't you have, tens of thousands of listeners on Spotify. Well, the answer is that we're not on Spotify. We're going to change that. So, yeah.
Okay, good. Good to hear. I mean, there's a lot there. I was really surprised. I'm like, it felt like I was stumbling into a conversation that had been going on for at least a decade, if not like 7 or 8 years or something like that. And then I'm like, well, where's the rest of the conversation?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, we do need to get it out there a little bit more. So people also know me as the owner, proprietor, Rex Sacrorum of Imperium Press. So the editor.
Yeah, I was just reading a Guardian hit piece on you. Congratulations on the Guardian.
Thank you very much.
Hit piece on you. So it's about a year old, but still, congrats.
Yeah, no, that was a bit of a surprise, actually. It was a nice little surprise after Christmas that last year, basically, where I got an email from a lady who writes for The Guardian, basically saying, "Hey, we're going to write a hit piece on you. Do you want to answer a bunch of questions?" So, and it was kind of funny because she seemed actually herself to be more curious than anything. And I mean, I'm not sure if she was just kind of trying to butter me up and, get me to say something stupid. But in any case, it didn't work. And really all it did was it platformed us. It got us a much larger new audience. And that was kind of awesome. And the hit piece itself, I mean, you read it. There wasn't much in there. You know what I mean? Because there wasn't
just a cursory reference to SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center,
something like
the
that.
collectors of hate.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all we really do is we republish classics, so anything from the cornerstones of the Western canon, the Iliad, Odyssey, Shakespeare, folk
Dude,
tales.
that's problematic shit, I have to tell you.
I know. Well, this is the thing is if they're going to say that kind of stuff is now off limits and that you can't, anybody who stands with them stands with, the mid-century Germans, then I think they're going to actually, this is kind of putting their own foot in their mouth. So I'm kind of happy for them to do that. But we also do, in addition to classics, some of the stuff that we do is to revive some of the lesser known voices from about 150 years ago or so, in terms of whether it's politics or history. So we did a volume of Joseph de Maistre's works. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him.
He keeps on coming up, but I have not read him directly.
Okay, yeah. So he is a counter-enlightenment, French counter-enlightenment writer, one of the best. He has an absolutely winning style, and he's actually quite funny in some ways, but also very deep.
When was he writing, just for context?
Early 19th century. So just in the wake of the French Revolution, he was one of the strongest voices writing against it. So we did an edition of his works, newly translated, and everything that we do is all our books are basically academic editions. They've got the foreword for that one was written by somebody who worked at SUNY Oswego, University. Rest in peace. He's no longer with us. But it also, all of our editions have academic introductions, indexes, bibliographies, the whole 9 yards. It's basically an academic edition, anything that we put out. And that one, so we did that one. That was, and we've done lots of counter-enlightenment, lots of that sort of stuff. We also did a book that did very well called The Ancient City, which was basically it's a historical work that was really famous in its time, about 1870 roughly. I forget exactly when. But basically what it does is it explains how Greece and Rome fell in quite a novel light, but it's also probably the most truthful explanation I've ever seen. Basically, it explains it in terms of the fall of their traditional religion, which is the ancestor cult. It's the worship of ancestors. It explains how, as that fell apart, Greece and Rome themselves fell apart. So without going into all of that, which is quite interesting, the book did very, very well. It got a lot of traction. Basically, before we got hold of it, it was essentially forgotten. And now, I've people like, Time Magazine, 100 most influential people have been going on podcast tours talking about it. So I'm really
Really?
happy to see that come back.
Wow.
And the last thing that I'll mention about what we do in Imperium Press is we publish contemporary works by people working today. So we've had a few of those go off and do very well. The first one that we had was a book called Nemesis by a gentleman named Chris Bond, which is basically explains power dynamics and how liberalism essentially is an engine for the production of political centralization, much in contrast to what it purports to be. That one went off very well. Maybe a year later, we published a book called The Populist Delusion by Nima Parvini. So Nima Parvini is he's also known as academic agent. He is a scholar, now independent, but was working in the university system.
Yeah, I was lucky to have him on a couple months ago.
Yes, yeah, you're familiar with him. So he wrote The Populist Delusion, and basically what it is a summary of the Italian elite school or elite theory school. It extends a little bit beyond the Italians, but essentially it is a rundown of all of the major thinkers in the last 100 or so years who have said that grassroots, bottom up social change is a fantasy. It doesn't exist. And that essentially power does it all.
Well, explain Barack Obama then, if that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well, so basically, like it goes through Gaetano. It starts with Gaetano Mosca, who is he's sort of the big bang of like elite theory, and it goes through a couple of other like big names you may have heard of. Carl Schmitt, although not Italian. He is sort of stands in the line of tradition of absolutist thinkers, going all the way back to Jean Bodin and Robert Filmer and Joseph de Maistre, actually, where Schmidt's idea of the state of exception is basically that power or like the government or official power essentially decides the law and is not bound to the law. That's the basic insight of absolutism. And Schmitt is one of the most powerful exponents of that idea, which is why even though he was he was a mid-century German, he's not canceled. He's still studied in the academy. It's because his analysis is so powerful. Moves from there. I mean, I could go through the whole book, but it goes all the way up to the people who are alive today or working in this century. People like Sam Francis and Paul Gottfried. So it's a fascinating book. It's a really digestible introduction to illiberal politics, and it was a bestseller. Basically, this book did amazing for us. And the most recent one that we put out, sort of in that vein, is my own book called The Cultured Thug Handbook, which basically goes through 45 different radical right-wing concepts. And explains them in a digestible way that the man in the street can kind of understand them, because they are either on the one side portrayed as being brain dead, like just stupid, like ideas, or on the other hand, extremely abstruse and hard to understand, sort of thing. So this book really sort of puts them into a digestible form. And we released that in November, and it's been absolutely crushing it. People are absolutely loving that book. So that's a quick and dirty introduction to Imperium Press.
Is it possible to be a heathen after Christianity, 2,000 years of Christianity?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Is it possible to not be a liberal after 100 and 200 years of liberalism?
Well, I certainly hope so. I'm not a progressive. So, okay. I mean, I am a restorationist. I want to restore sanity, essentially. I want to go back to, I think anybody sort of understands the impulse to do that. Anybody who's been sick or, especially has had a very serious illness, the impulse to go back. There's a kind of, we've really internalized this idea that history is linear and that we can only move forward. But I don't accept that at all. In fact, I think that history is quite cyclical. And you get this in the sort of the phrase has been so famous it's almost a meme now that good men make for good times make for weak men make for hard times, and hard times make for good men. Things kind of tend to go in this cyclical order whereby it's just inescapable, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
Well, yeah,
it's entirely possible to go back.
while degeneracy and the opposite of degeneracy are cyclical, as a matter of just necessity, in order for civilizations to flourish, they have to go through a cycle like a forest goes through a cycle, or like a tree goes through a cycle, where there's flowering, and then there's that sunny time, and then there's some sort of shedding of old ideas as they kind of no longer serve their purpose. And then what remains is that hardy thing that needs to be tested through the winter. And then there's another flowering, and maybe that's doesn't totally map, because degeneracy, one doesn't hope that a tree goes through degeneracy like a society does, but isn't that kind of independent from the discourse of ideas over time? One idea responds to another idea, responds to another idea, the accumulation of knowledge, these discourses and how they shape how we think. And then when we reset a civilization, those discourses get cemented, and we take those things as the assumptions. One conversation that's going on right now, kind of heatedly, is a debate over the post-war consensus. The West crystallized this narrative following World War II, following both of those wars. And now we're going through a process of kind of not worshiping those particular ancestors anymore. But the idea, the climate that we both grew up in, is indelibly stamped on us. I don't see how we can not be liberal, even as we strike out for something, or strike back for something that is maybe older than that, but still we come with a particular point of view. Does that hold water?
Yeah, well, I mean, what you're basically explaining there is the concept of thrownness. So this is Heidegger's idea that we're thrown into the world, we're handed a set of assumptions, we don't get to choose those assumptions, and that stamps who we are. And there's really not much that we can do that. And what's more, that it is actually our thrownness that is more who we are than our choices or anything else. We're kind of shaped by our environment in many ways. And now this is not a sort of radical environmentalism in the way that
is that totally blank slate, you're saying?
It's not a blank slate, because we come with a set of biological dispositions, and there's a kind of dialectical interface or interplay between the biological dispositions and the circumstances that those dispositions create, which is the world that we are born into, right? There's an interplay between those things, but it is really the things that we can't choose that are the most decisive, and that includes our biology, right? And this itself is a very illiberal idea. Blank slateism, as in, you are an individual who is radically free to make your own choices in life. You choose your tribe, you choose your identity, all of these things. This is basically sort of the liberal idea. And I think that you've hit upon something very truthful in that that's not really the case. We don't actually choose. Not only do we not choose those things, but that those things are decisive in shaping our character and everything. So,
but once the idea of choice gets introduced into the mix, like, that's part of our thrownness, having choice, having this kind of freedom to question, to rearrange, to choose, to convert, even, which is an older idea. That's a Christian idea.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, no, that definitely is, that is part of like the fabric of who we are today, right? And so we kind of run into this paradox whereby our tradition is revolution, um, but and that demands of us that we be revolutionaries. But in that environment, the only revolutionary is the traditionalist. So we're kind of in this catch-22 situation where it's hard to break out of that. And basically, the way that I see the matter is that that the we never kind of leave behind these ideas of like illiberalism or pre-liberalism or what I call the archaic. We never leave those things behind. We never really actually converted away from paganism. We never really stopped being Christians, after the Enlightenment. All of these things are carried with us and carried forward in the same way that as you build the edifice, as you build the building from the ground floor all the way up to the 87th floor, the ground floor, you don't throw that away. And if you try to throw that away, the whole thing's going to fall over. So what we've tried to do, basically what liberalism does in placing the abstract individual at the heart of epistemic life, of moral life, this is what the Enlightenment was all about. This is essentially putting the abstract individual at the top of the epistemic or moral hierarchy and saying that each person reasoning from his own self-generated premises is the absolute and highest epistemic authority. This is why when you see the Royal Society that Newton belonged to, their motto was nullius in verba, on the word of no one, right? The epistemic authority is the abstract individual, right? This is the basic idea of liberalism, and it is a powerful idea, and it's generated a lot of world-changing things. But essentially, what it does is it makes the child the governor over the father, right? Because, as you mentioned, we come preloaded with a set of huge firmware of assumptions, biological imperatives, background, proclivities, and all of these things. And to basically say, okay, all of that stuff, we've now superseded that, we've progressed beyond that, is a very dangerous proposition indeed, because history is long and prehistory is even longer. Maybe those things are there for a reason. Maybe those things, there's a wisdom in certain things that are now completely verboten, say something like ethnocentrism. Maybe there's a wisdom there that, there is no real alternative to some of these things that, because liberalism as a revolutionary philosophy, as the most revolutionary philosophy in the history of the world, maybe upsetting apple carts continuously and forever with increasing velocity is not the best idea, right? This is basically the idea of the traditionalist.
Yeah, but are you not going to, I guess there's two parts to this question. One, you're going to have to adapt your word to speak to people who've internalized that. Yeah. And two, you're probably going to take some of those liberal assumptions, some of those notions at least, forward because they are useful within certain contexts. I mean, just the idea of the individual being not necessarily the sole decider of their fate and of truth, but that's based on kind of a common law or contract law notion of what the individual is responsible for. The individual sets the term of the promises that they enter into and then can be judged accordingly. So I'm sure you want to bring some of those or even dial it back before you go forward, right? Because when we say we want to go back, where do we want to go back to? And a lot of people say, you bring up ethnocentrism, like, do we really is it really possible for us to go back to ethnocentrism with I keep on talking about Costco, but I live in America. We have this store called Costco. Yeah. Everybody goes there to get their cheap things. And everybody goes there, you pay a nominal fee or yearly fee or whatever to get in the door. So it kind of screens, it kind of has this simulated tribalism in it, but it doesn't matter your ethnic background or makeup, because it's just, you go in there, you get your products and you leave, and it benefits tons of people. So if you unwind, or if you put ethnocentrism first, then you start to corrode that medium space where does it not erode the medium space where ethnicities can overlay each other without conflict? And in a world right now with all of the advances that we have, the material advances we have, we're going to be running into each other constantly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the example of Costco is like it's an environment that relies upon a lot of things already being in place, right? It relies upon first of all, it relies upon, as you mentioned, the idea of contract law. It relies upon the idea of, first of all, not the rule of law, but law and order, right? Like that if someone starts swinging, it's not going to devolve into a brouhaha, or, people aren't going to start pulling out knives, that somebody is going to call the police are going to come, and that law and order is going to be restored. And that relies upon trust in the police, that people believe that the police and that the justice system is going to be fair. And that depends upon a high trust society. And this high trust society is itself actually being undermined by the very preconditions that multiculturalism and liberalism and all of these things, that it's already unraveling, basically, like the world of where everybody can live side by side, everybody that's completely different can live in peace and harmony. That really only existed in the kind of post-war order, or really more in the post-war order, because America was essentially an ethno-state before that, and not on paper, but de facto, right? Like there was a small minority of African Americans, with something like 15% of the population or whatever,
14, 15, yeah.
And not a whole lot of people beyond that. But now America is quite a different country. Now America is truly much more multicultural, and we can see the fruits of that. Things are starting to get a lot more tribal, and I think that when you see the ethnic stock, the founding ethnic stock, or whether it's Europeans or whether it's whoever it is, when you see a true plurality where there isn't just like one ethnicity that's in charge or essentially hegemonic, that's when you're going to really see tribalism come back.
So you think that when the WASPs had reign, then they could bring in the Italians, the Jews, the different sub-ethnicities in Europe, but as long as the WASP were in charge, they kind of set the tone, and then everybody plugged themselves into that order. But now that the WASPs have kind of disintegrated into this, it's still pretty waspy, but it's kind of got DEI codes and stuff, and a lot of different ethnicities, but they all kind of sound the same. All the people who are in the government there's a culture there, kind of almost not a biological ethnicity, but definitely a mimetic ethnicity. Like it strains and it teaches people to act in a certain way. Why can't that hold together? Why can't this idea of a ruling elite overcome or expand beyond a very narrow, Anglo-Saxon, or any, like, how narrow does that ethnicity need to be? And can it not just be porous as long as it's composed in a certain way or comports itself in a certain way?
So there's a couple of things here. First of all, I mean, I think it's ironic that it seemed that multiculturalism worked the best when basically we had a hegemonic 80% of one ethnicity sort of like in charge, right? That seemed to be the salad days where these things worked just fine, or seemed to work fine, like in the 60s and maybe into the 70s. But as the 70s rolled into the 80s and 90s, we started to have more strife, but there was something at the end of history where liberalism kind of got a second wind. But in the 21st century now, and especially since the Obama era, things have really, really devolved, and we are in fact becoming tribal. I don't think that there's any question about that. Now, the second issue is that elite is like the identity of the elite is essentially what you're saying, I think, if I could put it this way, is that it's propositional. So it's not based on your ethnic background. It's not based even necessarily on your class or who you were, like the family you were born into. It's the identity of this ruling elite is essentially based on affirming beliefs. So it's the you are what you believe. You are not necessarily a let's just say a Pennsylvania Dutch or a Quaker or a Hispanic or whatever, what have you. You are a liberal or you are a conservative or you are woke or an intersectionalist or something like that. It's I think that the idea is that these identities are becoming much more propositional over time. They're about affirming beliefs.
Well,
And
how does that contrast with Christendom or the Islamic world, or like a religious belief structure that spans several ethnicities, or even kind of plugs into and allows all these different ethnicities to have some sort of lessening of conflict and some sort of increase in trade, or the opposite of conflict?
well, I don't think ultimately, I think that's a good point because ultimately I don't think it does. I think that those two are kinds of propositional identities. And this is part of the reason why I'm not one of them, is that I don't think that those are actually strong identities. And what's more, I think that they paved the way for the world that we have today, which is, in my view anyway, objectively falling apart. But on the other hand, now they did last for, certainly Christianity lasted for a long time. And part of the reason why is that it over time became proxy for tribal identities. So as Christianity, is sort of developing in the ancient world, essentially what it does is it becomes a kind of, it's deputized by the elite in Rome in late antiquity to undermine tribalism, to undermine the tribes, like the Germanic tribes and things like that.
So it was kind of like a last gasp of the Roman Empire, like a stopgap to
So
maintain some
propositional.
sort of homogeny, or at least control.
Exactly. So what propositional identities do is by their very nature, they bring people together, right? They sort of they run across tribal lines and other identitarian lines. And what they do is essentially they are excellent pieces of technology to govern empire with. This is why you see them come in at the end of civilizations, or you see them come in when empire is consolidating, these universalistic religions. That's what happened in Rome. And it was very effective for keeping Rome together for a couple of centuries, but Rome had a major structural problem, so it eventually fell over. And then after Rome falls over, Christianity adapts itself. If you look at the Christianity of the early Middle Ages, as it was proselytized to the Germanic peoples, for example, there's a book called the Heliand, which is a translation of the Gospels into Saxon, Old Saxon. And I use the word translation very loosely because it's really more like fan fiction. It actually makes the Christ and his disciples into a Germanic war band. And the scene in the Gospels where Peter gets his ear cut off, or like one of the
He cuts
disciples.
Roman seer off, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It becomes this absolutely like hideous wound with blood gushing everywhere, and it's like
Just like what happened in Costco the other night.
yeah, exactly. So they've taken the Gospels and made it into a Norse saga essentially, but what I'm driving at here, though, is that Christianity adapts itself. It is infinitely flexible in a way that essentially conforms itself to the tribal identities of the people that it's governing. So it begins as something that's consolidating and sort of flattening out ethnic identities. But as time goes on, those identities are just strong enough where it can really essentially, they can be decisive. So this is what happens in the early Middle Ages. As time goes on, though, the power of the church and the Pope grows vis-a-vis the emperors until what happens at such time that you get the Protestant Reformation, right? Which is essentially the tribal identity of the Northwestern Europeans pushing back against the hegemony of Rome. So once Christianity becomes universalistic enough, and no, it's not just Christianity. You could substitute any universalist.
I mean, it's in
religion.
Christianity's the Tower of Babel saga, which sounds like what you're kind of talking
You could say the exact same thing has happened with Buddhism, right? With Mahayana Buddhism or Theravada Buddhism. I'm not beating up on Christianity specifically. This is what happens with all universalisms, all universal, not just religions even, but also liberalism, is that as they become more hegemonic, they devolve into these splinters. They start to splinter into de facto tribal identities. Now, they're not actually tribal. They are still ostensibly propositional identities, right? Something like, the Protestant Reformation, and that continues to splinter over time. Basically, what I'm saying is that universalism of the kind that liberalism wants, a kind of universal global empire, essentially, it just, by the very nature of what human beings are, it cannot exist. Creed is a proxy for blood, ultimately. Over time, that is always the direction that it seems to tend. And what liberalism wants to do is it wants to do away with all that. But in doing away with that, it kind of overlays this distortion on top of our natural identities. And that distortion can only go on for so long before the identities themselves assert themselves.
Does that distortion, is it a fair trade-off for internecine tribal conflict? Or can something else, does it have to be conflict? You just say, well, we'll take the trade and we'll police we'll have strong enough between things, like that universalism comes in for the market or for roads or whatever, ties all these discrete tribes together into something that's a powerhouse where everybody benefits. We still want the benefits.
Yeah.
But we want Costco, but we don't want like that destruction of our individuality somehow.
Right.
But maybe not. What do you like? Where does it go? Like if it can't, it stretches so far. These universalisms stretch so far, and then they collapse. But can we stop them from collapsing into another dark age?
Well, a couple of things here. First of all, this is like, you think of something like think of the Roman Empire or just Rome in general, right? Rome did not have a universalist religion, and yet it had a world empire. How was that? It had a kind of social technology that allowed for that while preserving tribal identities without erasing them. And that essentially was the client, the patron-client relationship.
Okay.
Right? So,
which is based on what? Just in a word, would it be power or might or something like that? Is that the lever of it, or is it some sort of benefit, not just a negative power sense, like you do what we say or we kill you, but some sort of you do what we say, we'll leave you alone, or something like that.
Think about the Godfather, the opening scene to The Godfather. Okay.
Yeah.
So what you have is Don Corleone sitting down with, I forget what the name of the character is, but like one of the people that's sort of under his like family or whatever, his extended family. And the gentleman comes up to him and says that his daughter's been beat up. The police won't give him justice. He asks the Don to give him justice. And what the Don says is, well, we've never really been friends. I mean, I've known each other for a long time. This is the first time you've ever come to me and as a friend or anything like that. That's a bit of a disappointment or whatever. You can see the guy starting to sweat. And he's like, but I'll tell you what, I'll give you justice. But what I'm going to do is at some time, I'm going to ask you for something. Now that day may never come, but when it does, you you're going to have to come calling, basically.
Hmm.
That is the patron-client relationship. The patron extends to the client protection and
Justice or
and
whatever. Yeah.
yeah, protection and like wealth and basically like a good life. But the client owes the patron absolute loyalty, essentially.
Okay.
So you can see what this is kind of like a centripetal force pushing people together. That's one way that it can work.
Hmm.
It doesn't necessarily have to work as a universalistic religion. Like that is a useful way for it to work, but it's not the only way that it can
But
work.
when something fails in that patronage network, something
Yeah.
failed with Rome. Rome wasn't able to live up to its promises, maybe in some way, or it devolved in its moral authority, and so it used a universalism to
Yeah.
hide that or to extend it a little longer.
So what happened with Rome essentially is that it extended this patron-client relationship further than it could naturally work. So it's one thing to have this sort of network of like clients and patronage, and now this isn't just like one don here, one don there, and like it's tribal warfare between them as you kind of think of with the mafia. There was a kind of, I mean, I'd have to get into the whole ancestor cult thing, which is a bit of an explanation in itself.
Have
But
you done
basically,
a show on that?
I've
We need
done,
to. I think
I've
we need to
written.
venture into there at least a little bit
Okay,
because it seems
all right.
like to be a cornerstone in your heathenism.
It definitely is, yeah.
Yeah.
So what the ancestor cult is it's the worship of family fathers, the line of fathers going all the way back. It's reckoned all the way back to the gods, essentially, in the religious background of not just Germanic paganism, which is what people mean when they say heathenry, but also Roman paganism, also Hinduism, also Zoroastrian or pre-Zoroastrian, basically all Indo-European peoples. The ancestor cult is the root and bedrock kind of religious background, essentially. So here's the way that it works. It is ancestor worship, where the family is comprised of a family father and the family mother, as well as the children and the dependents, and in the ancient world, all the slaves and everything like that. And the father is essentially the high priest. Each father in the house is essentially like a little pope. He is the high priest. He's also the absolute monarch. He is the supreme justice. He is the one who judges his family in terms of like law, essentially. It's what we have is private law in the household, right?
Hmm.
And there's very, very little interference from outside. It's kind of a custom between family. Now I'm explaining the ancient sort of iteration. Families, it was a custom between them where there was essentially no such thing as criminal law, right? Criminal law being sort of like state law, where the state judges you. Where even if, say, for example, the wife had trespassed against somebody else or killed somebody else, it would be left to the husband to judge her, right? This is how localized
Hmm.
law and familial relations were in the ancient world. So
Hmm.
the family father, what the Romans called the pater familias, um, was essentially the supreme magistrate and judge and pope of his family. And as the high priest, he led the family in the family worship, which is the worship of ancestors. And when the family father died, it would devolve usually upon the eldest son to take that up. So
What do
you
you
can
mean by
imagine
worship?
I mean, like literally worshiping them as a god. So it was reckoned that when a man died, his soul and his body were not parted. So
Hmm.
the soul remained with the body. The body would be entombed on the family property, but because the body and the soul remained together, the soul still required all of the things that you would need in life: food, drink, fellowship, this sort of thing. So the actual like the sort of nuts and bolts of the worship was essentially making sacrifices, like pouring libations, bringing food to the tomb so that the dead man could continue to eat and not become a hungry ghost in the afterlife.
Hmm.
And this continued for generations and generations and generations. But you can imagine as the family grows over time, the house starts to like ramify into different branches, right? And these different branches essentially become their own separate houses with their own separate worship. But there is still the line of the eldest son of the eldest son of the eldest son. And now this, eldest father in a community of fathers now becomes the clan chieftain. And this clan chieftain now leads those fathers each have their own household worship, but the clan chieftain leads all the fathers in a communal worship, essentially.
Hmm.
And as that grows, as time goes on, that's what we call the clan. So as time goes on, the clans itself continues to grow and grow and grow until it branches out. And you get multiple clans, each clan being presided over by this father of fathers with a bunch of fathers underneath him. But the eldest clan chieftain, or the clan chieftain that had the direct lineage from the original progenitor, usually on the father's side, would then become the tribal chieftain. So you've got and the tribal chieftain was to the clan chieftain as the clan chieftain was to all the other fathers. So you get these concentric circles of worship. You get the family at the center, then you get the clan outside of that, then you get the tribe outside of that, and then when you go one step further, you've arrived at the city state, what Aristotle called the polis, right? So, and the father of the father's father, ruler over the city state is what we call the king. So now we've kind of reached political categories that we at least understand, even if we don't have them today. So you can see that this sort of nested set of circles, of concentric circles of familial relations, this is another way that the society can hold together. And now what Aristotle says is basically he's kind of doing a kind of expansion of Dunbar's number, right? The number of people that you can.
Yeah, I was going to get to that because scale is a big problem that keeps coming up in this post-liberal.
Exactly.
Talking.
The thing is,
sphere.
like, no, it's really not possible to exist within a much more than a extended family of 150 people, like your nuclear family. And if you live in the ancient times, like, nuclear family might have been 10 people or something like that. But then you've got your extended family, your cousins, your uncles, maybe your second cousins, and that kind of thing. That might reach to about 150 people. After that, you can't really keep track of people's names. You kind of don't know who people are, sort of thing. So you need these intermediary structures in order to mediate between, the family and the clan and the tribe and the city, that sort of thing. You need these intermediary structures. And that's essentially what these things are, the clan and the tribe and all of these.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not necessarily a peaceful society. I'm not going to try to pull wool over people's eyes and pretend like tribalism was all like, kumbaya or anything like that. But it wasn't.
Well, it would go into certain cycles. Like, to go back to The Godfather, you would have in these, at a certain level of time, you have this spiral of vengeance going on between these subgroups within the subgroup, where they don't have an ethnicity anymore. They just, I think it's some sort of desert meme where me against my brother and I against my cousin, my brother and I, my cousin against the world kind of thing. At a certain point, like, you need, I don't know, at a certain point, societies either stabilize or they go into these justice spirals, like honor societies, different types of societies. And when you have the rule of law, so-called, where a more cleaned up version of this intermediary structure comes in, then you have kind of like a peaceful arrangement, but then that slides into bureaucracy once it gets too big.
Yeah. There's actually a fascinating set of plays. Well, it's very famous and well known. It's Aeschylus's Oresteia. So this is the first set of tragedies, the first Greek tragedies that we have essentially complete. And what the Oresteia is, so the TLDR of this set of plays is that after the Trojan War, all of the Greek heroes are coming home. Odysseus is coming home. Agamemnon's coming home. Ajax, all of the different characters that we know from Greek heroic epic are all doing their homecoming journeys. And pretty much all of them are meeting with disaster for various. It's because they essentially
got PTSD, man, and no support groups back then.
Yeah, well, especially when the gods are the ones inflicting it on you. And Agamemnon, the leader of the fleet of Greeks, he's not spared from that. Basically, he comes home to a disloyal wife who kills him, and this puts his son in a very bad position because on the one side, he is duty bound to avenge his father. He has to kill his father's killer, but his father's killer is his mother. So what does he do? Well, it turns out that Orestes, that's his son's name, kills his mother. And the gods are so horrified by this. They're so horrified by the idea of blood feud and blood vengeance that they actually put him on trial. And through the series, it's a trilogy of plays. What you get here is actually a kind of etiological explanation of the birth of state justice. So we've moved away from tribal justice and we've now arrived at the justice of the city state, right? Where no longer are these tribal intermediary structures, no longer are they the ones that are dispensing justice and essentially, keeping order. Now it's the city that's keeping order. And they've been essentially bypassed. It's like the birth of justice as we know it, moving away from something that is a little bit alien to us. Yeah. So, but on the other side of things, we are now on the other side of that. Now we're a different civilization. Our stage of tribal justice happened at a different time than the Greeks. But now we are on the other side of that. We're seeing what happens when the justice of the city, so to speak, goes too far, when it becomes too distant, and when it's hollowed out all those intermediary structures, which were essentially its deputies for keeping order. What happens when it gets rid of all of those things and only the city, or the state in our case, is left? What happens? What happens is wokeness. What happens is 2020, like the election of 2020. What happens is essentially tyranny.
Were you where you are now in 2020?
Yes, like politically, you mean?
Yeah, not politically. Like physically. Were you living in the state that you're living in now in 2020? So you experienced something much more drastic than what us Americans experienced with the lockdowns.
Yes, I did. Yeah, absolutely. That was an eye opener. That was absolutely an eye opener for me. That essentially, we cannot live even under the strongest state, even under the strongest centralized justice system. We cannot really live in these artificially large communities, right? And especially these heterogeneous, artificially large communities. So what's happening now is that tribal structures, or tribal is like, kind of the way it's almost like a slander. Really what they are is intermediary structures. The structures that stand between the justice of the state and the family. When these things are hollowed out, we get, the current year, basically. And what's happening is that those structures are now reasserting themselves. We're back to the cyclical history thing, right? Where if the center can't govern, in a way that's not dysfunctional, then these structures come back, right? And that's what's happening. Basically, what's happening is you're seeing that authority devolve to a more localized level. A simple example would be last year when the federal government said that Texas was not allowed to put piano wire up on the border. And Texas basically said, screw you, come and take it. And they didn't, right? This would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. and certainly 30 years ago. You know, uh, what's happening is that the center is increasingly, although it's tyrannical, although it is asserting its will arbitrarily and in ways that are actually out of step with justice, it's actually weaker now than it ever really has been in
Which
my lifetime, anyway.
probably has some sort of relationship to why it's acting the way it is. The
Yeah,
weakness is
exactly.
either
Exactly.
symptom or something like that.
This is something that Curtis Yarvin says, which is that basically strong government is the only government that could be small government, right? You can't, like, if you have weak government, it tends to grow and, like, you know, expand like a cancer cell. But if you have strong government, it is able to sort of feel, first of all, it's able to feel like it doesn't need to, you know, be tyrannical or whatever.
It almost feels like it doesn't exist. I can imagine that. It's really hard to explain Curtis Yarvin's ideas to people who haven't kind of wrestled with them, because they're just so out of step with the liberal mindset. Even when you're confronting a well-meaning liberal, Barack Obama enjoyer, Trump hater, awakener by the COVID and the 2020 shenanigans, and starts to question like these assumptions. So you're like, well, actually, if you start questioning these things, these go into this whole, there's a base, it's elephants all the way down if you go there, but it's really hard to communicate that a strong authority figure doesn't necessarily mean some sort of more tyrannical state than we have right now.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily, but people are really hard. They keep on, and we see right now the classical liberals, so-called, they're pining for this constitutional order or some sort of like place where we don't go in this direction. We don't have to have strong government, and authority itself is still anathema to the liberal, even though the liberal doesn't know what to do with authority other than stuff it away, and it comes back and tyrannizes them.
Yeah. Well, there's a kind of like conservation law when it comes to power or authority, shall we say. You can neither create nor destroy it. You can only distribute it in different ways, right? So it's utterly impossible. Like the socialist idea that everyone can be sort of a free individual, sort of contracting according to his own will without anybody, you know, without a boss or without somebody telling him what to do. Like that's just, I mean, I don't even have to address that. It's so ridiculous, I think. But the fact is that absolute power exists in one form or another. Either it exists in the pre-modern kind of way where Louis XIV is above the law, or it exists in the way of the archaic Bronze Age house father, where he is the law of his household kind of thing. Basically, you can't get rid of these things, right? It's like power either exists, like absolute power exists in some way or other, and we're kind of finding out what happens when you try to take it away from the most local level possible, because that's essentially what liberalism does, right? What it does is it hollows out these intermediary structures. It says to the and this is one of the things that I explained in the neo-reaction talk, the high, low versus middle, right? Where the high, or the official power, let's just say the government, deputizes the periphery or the low, so normal people, and sometimes an underclass, to say to somebody like the union boss or the
manager of some sort.
Yeah. And anybody that's sort of in a position to exert unofficial power, it says to the person on the bottom, you don't need that guy, right? You just need me to protect you from that guy. And that's what's been happening for centuries and centuries. And
what happens without that guy? Like what does the middle serve? Is this an analog to the middle class? Or
not the middle class.
Is it what would it be? I mean, what's like somebody who creates and sustains a business, let's say, like a business leader kind of guy, like that's the middle.
So the middle are basically social authorities that have power without having power on paper, right? Donald Trump is part of the middle. Because Donald Trump wields an enormous amount of power. I mean, he has a lot of money, but he doesn't have a like he's not the chief of the police,
So the
right?
people who get shit done, basically, the owners
Yeah,
and operators of society, in
yeah,
fact, are squeezed by the people who are the nominal rulers and the people who are the nominal ruled.
right. It's kind of like this pincer move from above and below against all of the powers in society that exert social authority. They have what used to be called gravitas, right?
Yeah.
Like they can say like I want this to get done, and somebody's going to do it,
Yeah.
right? Without having to have a gun put to their head.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of authorities.
I've heard you bring up the high, low versus middle, and I know you didn't come up with it. I know it's got like a history to it, but is this necessarily a new idea? Is this something that in your reading you've seen like pops up over and over again? And does it pop up at a certain stage of either a government or a society or something like that? Is it like another like just phenomena that arises when a society gets to a certain level of chaos or?
Yeah. So what happens is the high, low versus middle. Just to run it through really quick, just for people who are totally unfamiliar, the high would be official power like the government, the low would be like the people, and the middle would be like the intermediary structures in the pre-modern area. We would have called this the king is the high, the commoner is the low, and the nobles are the middle. So think of it in terms of that, I think. Now, during most of history, and like I'm talking like 95% of history, the high is deputizing the low to erase the middle.
Oh,
So
okay.
the king is using the commoners to get rid of the nobles, right? Because he needs them. Of course he does, because there is police force, there is army, there are all these things. But then,
They
you know,
want his seat at any moment.
well, yeah, exactly. They're hungry for power. They want to get rid of him, right? So the king basically uses the commoner to get rid of the middle.
Interloper. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the way it works for most of history. But at some stage, the society gets so dilapidated and so dysfunctional that that can no longer go on, right? And what happens is a counter elite rises up in the middle, and it deputizes the low. You get a middle plus low against the high. When that
Ah,
happens, when
you
that
get
happens,
MAGA.
that's what we call a revolution,
Oh, okay.
right? And that's the French Revolution, right? Or say the English Civil War.
Necessarily, I mean, is it like echoes of that in MAGA, echoes of that in the American Revolution? Does it necessarily end in the way that the French Revolution ended, or is there peaceful resolutions to that reset?
I don't think I'm be honest, I don't I don't think it will end peacefully.
Oh, okay.
But what you have like peace is basically that high low versus middle, right? This is when power is centralizing itself as the society is like the center of society is growing in power. That's when you get like a peaceful time, right? After the French Revolution, for example, and all of the revolutions that swept across Europe throughout the 19th century, the king lost his head. We had a new sort of high that was placed into the center, and over that period of time, that's when liberalism sort of existed in a more peaceful sense. So let's just say in the Anglosphere from about 1850 onwards. And of course, we had World War One and Two, but that was like a conflict between societies. That wasn't necessarily an intra-society conflict. So basically, peace happens as power is consolidating itself. But and everybody wants peace. I want peace. I'm sick and tired of all the chaos from 2020 onward and before then. But at some point, that peace comes at a cost, and that cost is essentially that society requires these intermediaries, the middle. It needs the middle to function.
Well, yeah,
Without
to
that,
go along and get along and to build and expand and maintain and all that stuff.
yeah. And what happens is that as the middle kind of gets erased, the high has nothing to keep it in check. So it starts to be tyrannical. It starts to act arbitrarily. It starts to do all these things that liberals complain about. Actually, this is why they don't like absolutism and whatnot, right? They're afraid of the arbitrary will of the king. But
Are
the
you? Are you not?
I'm in a way I'm not actually.
Hmm.
In that I just don't see. So this is what I'm saying about how there's a conservation law with power. Somebody has absolute authority at all times. Right now, it's the government or the center or the high, as we're talking about. We've now reached a point where the high is intolerably centralized, intolerably powerful, and it's starting to act in ways that are just completely like a cancer on society. It's
Hmm.
terrible. You know, I think most people can agree with that on some level. Essentially, the deep state is the absolute monarch of today. It haphazardly applies the law in nakedly political ways. Like, just look at what happened in Romania, right, the other day, where for people who are listening back to this, the election was overturned and annulled by the Supreme Court, right? Like, it just straight up, they were just like,
Hopefully
oh,
not the American Supreme Court. Hopefully.
no, no,
Okay, good.
the Romanian Supreme Court,
Oh
but
yeah.
you know, of course, the Romanian Supreme Court acts at the behest of these, essentially the deep state throughout, like because the deep state is kind of distributed throughout the
Yeah.
Anglosphere.
Yep.
They all kind of act in concert. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What was happening was that there was a rogue uh, politician, a populist, was able to gain power in like very significant like majority in the Romanian election, and the Supreme Court just said, "No, sorry, democracy, you voted wrong. You're going to have to vote again, and you
Of
better get
course.
it
Yeah.
right this time." Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like this kind of thing is, and I mean, just think of that in light of 2020. It's we have to admit that basically the deep state is an absolute monarch now. But here's the thing: an absolute monarch, like we have it whether it's distant or whether it's close, whether it's the house father or whether it's the deep state. I would rather it be the house father. I would rather it be close because I don't
Hmm.
think that there's a kind of conservation law of absolute authority. It's just a matter of how it's distributed. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't really like I tend to prefer my own father or like of my household as being the person that has power over me rather than somebody who doesn't even know my name,
Yeah, but
who might. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, I'm sorry. Sorry to push back, but I have to push back because I don't think my dad is capable, or I mean, he's retired, so I don't think that I'm
Yeah.
capable of ensuring that my sons, my stepsons, will have jobs because I can't barter with China, right? I need a higher authority to balance those higher authorities. Like the structure
Yeah.
is way too complex, and I still need to go get grain. I have no way of producing it myself. I'm
Yeah.
so, for better or worse, most of us are in the position where we don't have any bartering authority outside of like that little clan, but we need to rely on those who do have
Right.
authority to make things better for us. And so the structures
For sure.
of liberal democracy seem to be, if insofar as they can be regulated to work correctly, seem to be the best way in my society to battle or to leverage our collective power against China and get the best thing for me and mine, right? So it
Yeah.
doesn't scale. So I want power, but like it doesn't scale, and we don't live in a world that can be scaled down. It doesn't seem, barring some sort of actually efficient plague.
Right. Well, this is why I sort of look to the ancient model that we talked about before, where certainly each house father wasn't negotiating with the king of the
Of
city
Troy,
state
yeah.
next to him. Yeah, no, he wasn't like that. That wasn't how it worked back then either, right? You had this whole structure of nested authority, but it was absolute sort of at every stage, right? Where
Hmm.
the
Oh,
individual householder was kind of the judge of his family, and that it was just assumed or and accepted that the state didn't trespass against that authority. Now we have the opposite situation where if you say something in what was it I think 2 years ago, there was a law passed in Scotland whereby if you say something, hate speech at your dinner table, you can actually be fined or go to jail for that.
Kids are
Right?
getting called, the CPS are getting sick on kids for walking, a mile or two alone.
Yeah, I mean it's gone so
Well, at
far
the
in the
same
other
time, the
direction.
CPS will take your child away if you don't let the child get what they want with regard to life-changing medical interventions
Yeah,
along gender lines.
exactly.
So it's like,
So we've gone so far in the one direction that it seems to be kind of there's a revolt going on that says we want to push things in the other direction. And I
hmm,
think it's important to see what the roots of that other
okay.
direction are.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Is it
certainly,
wrong to assume that they're somehow more male than female, more masculine than feminine, from your point of view?
yeah, well, I'm a patriarch. Yes, of course.
Okay.
No question about that.
So how
But
do
I
you
don't,
convince? This is the WQ that keeps on coming up too in the
right.
post-liberal discourse. Like, how do you sell this to women? Like, women have the taste, they have the flu of liberalism running through
Yeah,
their veins. Like, there's no
certainly do.
vaccine or inoculation process for that. I mean, there, right? Or is there?
Well, I mean, I think that certainly, like, say paganism, for example, has a serious appeal to women. There are probably more women who are pagan than men, at least currently. Now, of course, there's a lot of them are lefty, whatever, but there's a serious like hippie girl to heathen like mom pipeline. That's a thing.
Oh, like
That's a
really trad
real
moms,
trad.
like
Yeah,
real
exactly.
trad. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but basically, like women, I mean, like real talk, women are they tend to like basically take on the they tend to take on the worldview of social authorities essentially, right? That's what women are evolved for, right? This is why we have things like the Stockholm syndrome, right? Where and I mean this is a human thing to a very very large degree, but men, and we're talking in generalities, obviously not every woman is going to believe everything that her society says, not every man is going to reject everything that his society says,
Hmm.
but in general women are more socially conformist. In general, men are less socially conformist and tend to be less agreeable and tend to reject the status quo more often. So I don't think that the vanguard is going to be led by women, but at the same time, I think that what's happening, like, is it a good time to be a woman today? Look at the happiness index, or look at the self-reported happiness of women today. It's lower than it's ever been, ever. Now they might say something like, "Well, we have to do jobs now and be moms and things like that."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But like and the fact is that they like, I mean, it's something I've thought a lot about. So with women being moms and having to work, like that's something that isn't natural for them. It's something that they actually don't like, and they would probably prefer not to do if they didn't have to.
Well, it depends
So,
on what you mean by work, because there's plenty of jobs. Like, women were never lazy through history. Women were
no, certainly
always
not.
working, but maybe
Being a
not at a
mom is a
corporate.
hard job. Like
Yeah,
no
well, yeah,
question
but I
about
mean,
that.
just even like after your kids you have all this extra energy and mental capacity, then you start to extend beyond just being a mom at a certain phase of your life, unless we're talking like you're going to maid women after they reach menopause, which I don't assume that's what you're saying, but
No.
there's plenty of work for men and women and the family to be integrated. Maybe not in the way that we think of it now, with going to a job. Maybe I don't know if that's possible for women to be happy with. But
Yeah.
then they
Well, I
take a
mean,
cut in salary, and that's a whole discussion.
think about like, okay, so when should women work? Like, at what age should they work? Well, should they work at, say, they've graduated high school at 18? Should they go out into the workforce, or should they get a university degree? 4 years at a university. 22 years old, they enter the workforce, and then they might work for 3 or 4 years, 5 years, build their career, and then maybe start thinking about having children. Well, they're 28 now. Oh, but they met the wrong guy, and things didn't quite work out. So they've got to find somebody. Now they're 30, and they're thinking about having children. Okay, they found the right guy. They're going to have kids now, but they're now 10 years past their child rearing prime. I'm talking about in terms of their ability
Physiologically,
to, their energy level and everything like that. Having a child at 30 is exhausting. Having a child at any age is exhausting. Having a child at 30 is much more exhausting than having a child at 20. When you are, you have all this energy and everything like that. So you have a child at 30, and you're exhausted. And your parents did the same thing because, of course, this is a societal custom or whatever. So your parents are too old. They can't really take care of the kids. Maybe they live somewhere else because society told you that you should go have adventures and move away. So you've got no help. All the other parents are in the same situation as you. They're exhausted. You're exhausted. It's like that's just not a good, that's not good for women. No wonder they're unhappy because women want children. It tends to be that if women don't have children, when they hit some age, roughly somewhere after 40, they're very, very unhappy.
Are you saying so? Heathenism is a fecund social system.
Oh, it certainly is. The ancestor cult is all about children. It's all about having children. It's there. There is a. It's not just in scripture that you should have children. It's actually baked into the structure of the religion that you need to produce children. To continue the worship. Now, contrast our hypothetical woman who's, she's now 40. Her kids are not yet grown. She's exhausted. Her career is still on pause because she's had kids. But it's much, much harder. Contrast that to the woman who had children at 20, a couple years out of high school. She married her high school sweetheart. She had kids, and, single income household, maybe not, that well off, but at the very least, she's got the energy to deal with the kids. She's had 2 or 3 kids. She's now 26 years old. She's done having children, but she's still young. She's got all the energy. There are other moms around her that are in a similar circumstance, right? Now, obviously, it's a bit of a pipe dream right now to have single family households. I just don't think that that's an eternal thing. But supposing that, we did have this. Okay, so she's got the kids. They basically can't take care of themselves legally until they're about 12 years old. So at the very earliest, she's had her third kid when she was, I don't know, let's just say 24. So she's 36 by the time she's no longer raising children. So now it's time to go out and start working. But who's going to hire her when she, only has 50? Well, everybody's working until they're 80 now, but she has half of her working life available to her rather than a man who has entered the workforce at 16 or 18 or something like that. Basically what I'm saying is that if women want to have children young, then there really is no time for them to work. If they don't want to have children young, they're going to suffer and it's going to be terrible for them. And that's the situation that women are in today. There really is no time for them to work. There's no ideal time for them to actually go into the workforce unless they want to not have children, which objectively makes women absolutely miserable.
I'm just saying there's a lot of life and energy after 40.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But then you've got, okay, so let's go back to our example, right? This lady's had children when she's 20, their first child when she's 20. And that child has their first child when they're 20. So she's 40, or, let's just say, let's push a little bit. She's 45 and she's a grandmother now. Her child is going through all the same issues, all the same problems that she's gone through, and now needs the help. Having a kid at 20 is better than at 30, but it's still exhausting. So her son or daughter needs help,
Hmm.
and she's there as the grandmother, helping, taking care of the kids and whatnot, doing grandma stuff, having the energy. I'm older than 40. I still have the energy. I could easily, if I didn't have young children myself, I could easily be a grandpa. I could easily like take care of kids, and it would be awesome. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I have the energy for it, but I had my children quite late. So if they do what I do, I may not even see my grandchildren. Or if I do, I'm going to be old and I'm going to be useless to them. You know what I mean? And this is something I've told my kids. Have children early, earlier than you think, and have more than you think you can afford, right?
Have
Like
kids early,
that's
have kids often.
exactly, right? Um,
But so in that hypothetical with the woman, so what you're saying is that a structure, a social structure that prioritizes and adulates motherhood
yeah,
and grandmotherhood, like being continually raising children
yeah.
as a social good.
Yeah, so that society is first of all going to have happier women, because they're going to do the things that they're like biologically that make them happy, right? In a way that is more in comportment with their overall happiness. So they're going to be able to do that at times where they can do it, where it's the most enjoyable. They're not going to be able to go out and be barflies and college girls and stuff like that. But let's be honest, I mean, is that more fulfilling than like your children? I sure hope not.
Hmm.
But anyway, it's going to be much, much better for them. And here's the thing. What's the alternative? Think about what the alternative to that is. Well, the alternative to that is declining birth rates. The alternative to that is South Korea with a zero point 0.7 children per woman birth rate, population collapse, that the only thing that can solve that problem is mass immigration, which creates all this social strife, which makes women feel very uncomfortable going out at night, which makes everything, it sort of throws sand in the gears of the economy because, there's low social trust, what we said
Hmm.
before about, the social trust essentially like making that Costco world go round.
Hmm.
What's the alternative to high birth rates? Well, the alternative to high birth rates is high immigration, and the fact is that a lot of people, women included today, are starting to say, well, we don't want that. So but you have to choose. You have to choose the one thing or the other thing. There really is no alternative between those two.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's a matter of trade-offs, really, and I'm just
Yeah.
thinking that the one trade-off is objectively better than the other.
So, with a social system like heathenism, as opposed to Christianity, Christianity, even though most churches are empty, the churches are still there, the literature is still there, the
Mhm.
mythology and the lessons are still there, the iconography is still there, and echoing in our society. How would I guess, is it a part of your project to like scale heathenism up, or is that just more of a personal thing for you? Paganism.
Yeah, so I mean, yes, it is. I have started with the help of a few people, we've started a website called hearthfireradio.com,
Hmm.
which is a new podcast platform for heathen content. And so it's basically like,
I'm really
heathen podcast.
Christian, so every time you say heathen, I think of it as like a
No,
slanderous
I
word.
understand. The problem is that there isn't really a good word for it,
Hmm.
right? I would ultimately, I would call, I think paganism can really just mostly be characterized as the ancestor cult. But if I go around saying that I have a cult in my house, I don't think that's really the best thing to put forward.
Don't tell the feds that for
No,
sure.
exactly. But I mean, it's cult in the sense of like the original, the word cult, is the root of the word cultivate, right? It's something that you take care of. It's something that you manage. It's something that
Yeah.
you grow. It's very organic, right? It's just that that word means something different now. So
Hmm.
in any case, um, my project, I would say, if I have a political project, is to revive what I've called folkishness, right?
Yeah,
And
you bring that up.
folkishness is
It's very
basically,
mid-century Germanish.
yeah, well, I suppose so, but it's also much, much older than that. It's really the oldest sort of worldview that we have, kind of thing.
Hmm.
It's certainly not that. It's way, way deeper than that. Folkishness is basically the idea that that you that you have a sort of partiality towards what's close to you, essentially. Whether that
Oink,
is
oink,
ethnically,
onkophois, or there's a Greek word you're going to drop, right?
yeah,
Oikophilia? Is that right?
oikophilia.
Oika.
Yes, yes. So that's actually a term that was coined by Roger Scruton that I picked up, but
Hmm.
it's like actually a very old idea. So in the Cultured Thug Handbook, my new book, there's a couple of different sections. One of them explains sort of like it steps you through how to get rid of liberalism, how to erase it from your thinking, how to start from MAGA and go to kind of
Hmm.
where the dissident right is. So that's the first section. The second section goes through a bunch of different like illiberal concepts. The third section though is what I call the big ideas, and the big
Hmm.
ideas are these radical right wing ideas that like have existed forever. And I start with Homer. I start with the Odyssey, and then I go to the Book of Job, and then I go to the Greek philosophers, and so on and so forth. And each one of these chapters explains a different concept in light of these titans of the Western canon. And the one from the Odyssey is called Oikophilia. So actually, people don't really read the Odyssey as much anymore as they used to. So a lot of folks are probably not that familiar with it. Basically, what happens after the Trojan War, as I mentioned before, the Greeks are sort of scattered to the four winds. The gods, they've sinned against the Trojans. They went too far. They did all this nasty stuff, war crimes, we would call them today. So the gods are unhappy with them, and each one of the Greek heroes now goes through a trial. And
Hmm.
the Odyssey is the trials of Odysseus. So basically, he takes his men, he's blown off course. He's blown to the lair of the Cyclops, where the Cyclops eats a bunch of his men. They barely escape by the skin of their teeth. He's sent to the Isle of the Witch. He has to go to the underworld to find his way back. He just goes through all these things over and over, and it's the adventures that we really know. That's what we know about the Odyssey. That's only half the book. It's actually the second half of the book that I think is the deeper and more important part, what the Greeks called the Menestrophonia, the
Hmm.
return of Odysseus to Ithaca, to his homeland. So he's been away for 10 years. His son was just born when he left, a baby. He fights at Troy for 10 years. And he spends 10 years getting back. He doesn't even know his son. It's been 20 years since he left. His
Hmm.
wife has been faithful to him. She's the suitors are trying to marry her in his absence. There's all these people trying to, usurp his throne. There's all these folks that have come in that are just eating through all of his store. They're eating through his food. They're abusing his servants.
Hmm.
All of these terrible things are happening, and he finally gets home, and he thinks he's going to get home to a hero's welcome.
Yeah.
He thinks that they're going to roll out the red carpet there, and when he gets back there, he gets a surprise.
Yeah.
We'll say that much. He is not happy, and the
Hmm.
rest of the story is basically the story of him infiltrating with the help of his son, who he's only now just met, infiltrating into the castle of Ithaca, getting in there, slaughtering all the suitors to a man, and then sitting back onto his throne. But the thing is, the overall picture, the important thing to get out of the Odyssey is that Odysseus does not want adventure. He doesn't like it. He doesn't want to be on the Isle of the Witch. He's having fun. He's having all these adventures, and he's sailing by like Charybdis and the sirens and everything like that. He doesn't want any of that. He just wants to get home. He wants to grill. He wants to get home. He wants to sacrifice a few hecatomb of oxen. He wants to see his hearth. He wants to see his wife. He wants to be a grill dad. He wants to get home and be a normal person. Well, he's a king, but he wants to get home. And the thing is, he
I'm sure
loves
he
his home.
wouldn't. He doesn't want to set down his wit either when he gets home either.
I'm sure. Well, it serves him well because that's basically part of how he gets in there, how he's able to reestablish himself. But at every turn in the Odyssey, we see the love of home. He just pines for his hearth, for his wife, to see his son. He's dying to get back to his home. And it's this love of the hearth, the love of what's close, the love of the home, the love of the native, what's from here, what's ours. That is oikophilia. And essentially, that's folkishness in a nutshell. That is really the impetus behind folkishness. It's good because it's ours, not the other way around. It's not ours. We didn't go out and find it. We didn't go out and look for something that's the best. What's the best is the best because it belongs to us.
Yeah.
And that's really the basic idea behind folkishness.
Yeah. Listening to your retelling of the Odyssey made my mind think about, there's this movie 20 years old now called Falling Down, probably 30 years old. Michael Douglas, he retires, or he doesn't even retire. He quits his job and he tries to find home, but he goes through like this hellish post, modern landscape of like just societal destruction and stuff. But there's, in a way, every man does go through what you were talking about, the woman's life, the woman's trajectory. If she stays home, she raises kids. And then when she's done with that, she raises another set of kids. Well, the man's trajectory, he works 20 years. He gets to retirement and he comes home and he's like, what is going on here? He's been gone in a way. Men are absent for that time that women are present. And there's this intersection when they both become grandparents that there is a reintegration. There is a story about the male reintegrating back into home after going forth and being that, even being absolute authority of your household, especially in those early years. There is a separation between you and your children. There's a separation between you and your wife. You are like the objective king. Like there is not that warmth in a certain respect. I know there is love, but it's mitigated through authority and through justice. And at a certain point in time, the old king is allowed to integrate, I think, back into the home. And I even think you could do a kind of a slight Jungian-ish reading where every character that he has to defeat is an aspect of himself. Like all these other parts of himself that creeped into the home while he was gone, while he was absent, like are there, and he has to kind of kill like these suitors in a way that he became in his absence, right? And I think a lot of men do become absent. I think there is a lot of there's this whole cycle about the trajectory of a man that isn't just, he's just the hero, the authority. He goes through these phases in life. The midlife crisis is a myth for a reason. And every generation kind of manifests it differently. And the boomer time, you would quit your house, you'd divorce your wife, you'd get a new girlfriend and get a new car. And in my generation, Gen X, we treat our bodies like a new car, try to turn it into a teenage girl, and then we demand our wife like accept us as the girl that we always knew we were, but there's still like this reintegration. I'm sorry, that's not political. It's not even really on topic at all, but there's a lot going on. There's a very rich, full life in any given one of these systems. Maybe not necessarily in this kind of deracinated, postmodern, what you said about like the hollowed out center that we're living in now. Like, I don't know if there's much mythology, and that's why things are going careening so far off of the rails, because we're trying to manifest all these processes and we don't have the structure that grounds us in a way.
We kind of need those myths, right? Don't we? We need the myths. And now I wouldn't by any stretch exclude the Bible from this too. I think that there's important things in there, and I have a lot of respect for, say, I mentioned before, the Book of Job. I think that is an absolutely brilliant piece of world literature. But we need these myths, right? And we will have them whether we want them or not. We will recreate them spontaneously if need be. And you mentioned Falling Down. I'm glad you did, because the Falling Down is a retelling of the Odyssey. I don't think it was meant to be a retelling of the Odyssey, but that's what it is, right?
Any more than Starship Troopers was a telling of an intentional telling of, or at least the movie of the Iliad. But
I don't know that one. Was it actually intentional?
I don't think so. I'm
Okay.
throwing out like media literacy for the media
Right.
literacy crowd right now.
But what Falling Down is it's the story of a man who has gone off to war, essentially. He works in the defense industry. He is unappreciated and kind of cast out after he's no longer needed from this. And he goes through a series of Odyssey-like adventures. He meets the Cyclops. He meets like the witch. He meets all of these different things. Like, remember in Falling Down, he goes through gangland and he meets the hooligans. He goes to the Korean guy's shop and everything like that. He goes to like the burger world and all that.
Yeah.
He's encountering all of these obstacles. He just wants to get home. Everybody's getting in his way, and he's going home to see his family. But here's the thing. Falling Down is not quite the Odyssey. There's one very important difference. Penelope, Odysseus's wife in Falling Down, is the anti-Penelope. She's divorced him. She's trying to keep him away from his children. She's called the police. She's sicked the police against him, right? And we know how Falling Down ends. It's a tragedy, right? The Odyssey is an epic. It's a triumph. This is the opposite. It's structurally almost the same, but with that one turn.
And why?
The
Why
whole
do you
thing
think
is
the turn
inverted.
is there?
Why is the turn there?
Yeah.
I think it's just an honest reflection of our society, where we're at. There are not that many Penelopes out there today, right? They're mostly no, well, they're much more so. I wouldn't say mostly, but they're women are much more so likely to identify with the mother or his wife, ex-wife, I guess, in Falling Down today than they are with Penelope, because and this is why we are where we are, right?
Well,
divorce is so
I don't
high.
want to. I don't want to accept men's responsibility from that, because if you take out men's responsibility from the state of our being, how can men get responsibility back? If
I would say
men's responsibility is the key.
I would say women are not responsible for that. I would say that men are responsible for that, 100% responsible for that. Because remember,
my wife's going to like this part of the conversation.
Yeah, remember, it's in the heathen worldview or the pagan worldview or the patriarchal worldview, it's the patriarch that has absolute authority in the household. So we got here not because women tried to, be too big for their britches or anything like that. No, not at all. We got here because of weak men. And it's strong men that are going to get us out of this, right? And I think that there's a craving for that. People are crying out for that. That's why people like Donald Trump, even though he's not like a Odyssean patriarch. He's a man that has such strong frame that nobody can break it. The main reason why people like Trump in the first place is because he was the only guy that was able to go and dump on their enemies, right? He was the only man that was able to, he had the wherewithal, he had the personality, he had the money, but mostly he had the character and the constitution to stand up against the whole Republican Party and say, you guys are fake conservatives. You've conserved nothing. Here's what a real political platform looked like. And for the man in the street, the reason why Trump became such a phenomenon and why he now has this auctoritas, the authority, to basically say, I want this to happen, and then somebody does it. The reason why he has that is because he is the only man, it seems, that is able to stand up against these people, who has the guts to do that, and who has the vision.
Just on the Trump point, I think something happened something happened or something didn't happen, and he almost got killed or assassinated or whatever. He seems different. He seems like he's a different person now. There's something that got reordered. I'm just putting that out there. People can disagree with me. Something got reordered in his orientation to his ego changed. His purpose changed. something changed in him. He's a little wiser now. He's a little more tired too. I can see like this wariness in him, but there's some his gravitas went to a different level, I think.
Yeah.
And I think it does show that the man doesn't need to be, or the picture of an authoritarian man or an authority does have a phase of being very brash and egotistical and kind of winsome a bit. But there's also this other phase to it. Once authority has been, once the authority really is captured, then there's this other transition that happens.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Absolutely. In Trump's case too, I think that he certainly seems different since the attempt on his life. And I think people now view him differently too. And I think he probably views himself differently. Maybe not the same way that others do. But I think that there is now a mythical element to the Trump story where just think about the unlikelihood, the sheer probabilistic unlikelihood of what happened on that day. That it became so close to him being killed. And that what happened was we were within a centimeter of maybe something very, very bad happening, not just to him, but imagine what would have happened in the wake of, that turning out differently. Yeah. We came within a hair's breadth of that. And now there is a mandate of heaven style aura to Trump. You know what I mean? Where he's completely, as a political figure, completely untouchable. There is not a Xi Jinping, not a Vladimir Putin, not a man on this earth that has the same autoritas as he does. I've been using authority, right? That same sort of unspoken authority that he does. There is no political figure, certainly in the West, that has that. And he had it before, but that has really pushed it into a new level kind of thing.
Yeah. Mike, I think your political project, it's not a political project. That political project slanders what I think your work is. And I didn't realize that when I was listening to you. I was just really fascinated because you've read so much and you're putting things together in this great way. I'm really looking forward to getting your book, reading it and sharing it, and I'll link it in the description. But I think that the way forward, we can talk about ideas a lot, and a lot of people get really into these ideas, and they're fun, and it's good practice, and it leads to good conversations. It's a good place for human connection and dialogue, and this really key component of being this wonderful, cultural world that we are. But ultimately, the truth of the ideas has to be borne out in action, and it needs to be modeled in a life-size container. And I sense that what you're doing in your cultural projects is to be the man that you want to see in the world, and point to, that's really cheesy, but to point to these different examples and stuff, but actually to show what it is to be a man right now, because there is a lot of men online who will talk to men online and give them paths to go that I don't think are necessarily, it speaks to their discontent. It speaks to their, being treated so poorly in this world, but I don't think it really lifts them up. It just gives them something to be angry about, and it turns them into little bitches, if I may go so far.
Yeah, you're right.
Right. And so we can critique, and part of the woke right critique is kind of pointing to this resentment within the right that is really, it's beneath men to be that way. And men that go that way tend to make things worse for everyone, including themselves and those who are connected to. And so there's a way to critique the current order that is still exuding strength, exuding virtue. And I feel like I sense that that's where you're headed. So Guardian article aside, I think you're on the right path.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I agree absolutely. Ultimately, what political ideology is it is a set of training wheels, right? It gets you where you need to go. It gets you, able to keep the bike going without having it fall over. It gets you to a certain level, but when you're done, when you're at that level, you then throw away the training wheels, right? And ultimately, and this is sort of the final message of my book, there's a little sort of epilogue at the end of it where I basically say as much that that quote by Gandhi, you have to be the change that you want to see in the world,
Yeah.
is right. He was not wrong. Now he might have been a libtoad or whatever, but he's absolutely right. There's not
Yeah.
he's like I can give the devil his due. Absolutely right. If your ideology can't if the ideology of liberalism or of certainly of wokeness at least can't stop someone from being fat and disgusting, then it's worth nothing. Absolutely nothing. And look at communists. The worldview that we are offering at Imperium Press, the worldview that you will find in the Culture Thug Handbook, the worldview that I've been talking about that we call folkishness, has been improving men since we lived in trees.
Yeah.
This is the
Time
default
immemorial.
worldview.
Yeah.
Right. This is the null hypothesis that liberalism has to justify itself against, not the other way around. I'm not critiquing liberalism. Well, I am, but ultimately, liberalism's critique of what I'm saying has failed, is basically the way I'm putting it, right?
What kind of
So you
man
can
has
throw
liberalism created?
Sorry?
What kind of man has liberalism created?
I think it's created a man like Jordan Peterson. Now, I say that not as a slander because Jordan Peterson is an impressive man in many ways, but he is also a fundamentally broken man. He's an unhappy man. He's a confused man. He wants to be a Christian, but he can't get himself there, right? He's a cultural Christian, but he can't get himself over the line. Look, I'm not going to slander Jordan Peterson, but and a lot of men look up to him, but he is a stepping stone or an interim towards which men must be moving, right? He's done a lot of good. I give him his due, but at the end of the day, it's just not strong enough meat. A Jordan Peterson is not going to be able to stand up against the deep state. He's going to become a creature of it. He's going to become an apologist of it. We don't need that. We need something older, deeper, and stronger than that. And that's the alternative that I think the dissident right is offering, the woke right is offering, that folkishness is offering, and that we're offering.
Do you think that Trump is similarly a liberal man, a man that liberalism created?
I think Trump is a non-ideological man. I think of Trump as more like a Caesar type figure, right? Caesar was a populare in the Roman, the Roman Revolution, moving towards the end of the Roman Republic. He was a very intelligent man. He wrote voluminously. He did many great things. He was a general. He was a great speaker and everything like that. But what you don't really get out of Caesar is much philosophy. You don't really get an ideology out of him. He is what, and I hesitate to introduce another concept so late in the conversation. He is what I call an Odinic man. He is the Odin. He strides in. He is the great man that overturns things and initiates a hard reset. Now, Trump falls somewhat short of that. I think there are men in history, Caesar would be one of them, who have done that. But Trump is an approximation of that. I don't see him as an ideological liberal. His platform.
He's a Mick Odin.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, that's right. It's like the Happy Meal version of that. But if you look at his 2016 platform, there's basically three planks. Number one, reduce mass immigration. Number two, no wars forever. Number three, economic protectionism. None of those are liberal platforms. None of them. Right. I think that he, being a non-ideological person, he thinks of himself as a liberal. Under the hood, at a deeper level, he is really more of an authoritarian or a lot of people are going to bristle at me calling him that, but let's just say a Caesar type figure. I think that's a little bit closer to the mark, if not quite, all the way.
Mike Maxwell, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with you. I'm going to end the recording now. I'll link to your work down in the description, including your book. I have to read it because I always forget things, and it's inconveniently not there. The Cultured
Thug
Handbook. Why thug?
Yes. So the Cultured Thug is that's actually a reference to, are you familiar with Jonathan Bowden? Have you ever heard of him?
This sounds familiar.
He was an orator that was sort of bound up with the European or the British New Right in the 2000s, essentially the forerunner to the alt-right. And he unfortunately died of, I think, heart complications in about 2012. But he was just a master orator, sort of doing what this book is doing, in that he would summarize and essentially lecture at a university level about different thinkers. He did, anything from H.P. Lovecraft to Martin Heidegger to Punch and Judy. He would explain it in ways that were deep and interesting and fascinating. And he came up with this idea of the cultured thug. And what the cultured thug is the man who can think and fight. He said that, men who have courage have no intellect today. Men who have intellect have no courage today. We need a cultured thug. And this book that I've written is essentially carrying on that project of fostering the cultured thug, the man who looks and acts and sounds like a man, who talks like a man. And if you read the book, you'll notice the language that I use, but who also understands the deep history of, basically like this figure, right? And the oldest cultured thug that I can think of is actually Aeschylus. The man who I mentioned was the author of those three tragedies. He is one of the greats of Western literature, but on his tombstone, he had it inscribed nothing about his being a tragedian, but that he was a soldier. So here is the ultimate cultured thug. The cultured thug goes back a long way, and this book is just the next iteration of that.
Are you? Can people follow you? Those of shorter attention spans. Do you have any social media that people can hook onto, or podcasts? And what's coming up next for you guys?
So you can find Imperium Press on Telegram. You can find Culture Dads on YouTube. You can also find Imperium Press on YouTube as well. We are still all over social media, but we've basically been shadow banned everywhere a long time ago. But anyway, we do have YouTube channels, Imperium Press and Culture Dads. You can, if you want to look at our catalog, you can go to imperiumpress.org. If you want to sign up for the Culture Dads podcast and get episodes every week, go to culturedads.com. And if you're curious about this heathen stuff, you can go to hearthfireradio.com.
Excellent. I'm going to end the recording. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Hey, Mike.